I think, I mean, this sounds very interesting. It kind of reminds you of that. I think it's a Jane Fonda quote, which says like, we don't remember what we say or do, but we remember how a person makes us feel. And that's really what it really comes down to. I mean, I know that when it comes to any type of relationship, friendships, or even, personal or everything else like that, it's vastly complex. But every time we describe it, or every time I hear it one side or another, it's so overly simplified, but that's all people remember. Like I said, the whole like this person's being toxic, period. And I'm like, well, that sounds oversimplified to me. Maybe because my mind is kind of like, well, that seems too exaggerated. Like I'm gonna say something that doesn't sound right, but this does go through my mind, admittedly. But I remember I was with a friend of mine, and she told me that she left in an abusive relationship, and the guy hit her. And now my first reaction was like, okay, that's shitty. And then quickly after that, I thought, well, why? But nobody would ask why, right? So I think most people just attach to the fact that he's just an abuser and that's it, period, which is the truth. But I think my mind was, well, why was it? What exactly happened for him to do that? Was he drunk? Was he, did it happen multiple times? Was it because she was insulting his family, right? Maybe it could be like something extreme like that. Who knows? But the idea was that my first reaction was, it was a simple enough story for me to quickly not want to go any deeper than the fact that he's just an abuser. That's it. Or he hit her and that's it. Right. And so something extreme like that, going any deeper than that, almost felt taboo for some reason. Almost felt like there's something wrong with me if I wanted to. Right.
It's a sensitive issue because like there's a sense of understanding the behavior, where that behavior is coming from. There's another condoning it, right? They're making a judgment around it. These are two separate things, and it can be confused with each other.
Exactly. So I felt like if I were to ask, well, why did you do it? It would seem like I'm condoning it, but I'm not.
Yeah. You need to make a separation out of it. And when you make that separation, it's really hard for me to hate any human being. Right. Because of that reason. Because when you go deeper into that, even an abuser, usually abusers have been abused themselves as a child, physical abuse, right? Like it goes like in vicious cycles. Nobody like who had like a either like childhood grows up to be, abuser, domestic abuser, and like you usually see certain elements, and sometimes neglect, like because like when you're abused, especially physically attacking someone, is a very fight or flight. Like that response is actually that. But as a human being, we also have a prefrontal cortex that helps us to control ourselves, inhibit behavior. We all feel like punching someone at certain times, right? Yeah. I don't know if anybody never felt like. Yeah, I felt that plenty of times, right? There's a part in my brain that, inhibits that behavior, right? I have the ability to inhibit. Some people don't have that ability to inhibit because, again, early childhood experiences, they never develop that skill very well. So they can be more impulsive, and there can be a lot of different kinds of externalizing behaviors with that too. So I can have compassion for that person, right? But I would still won't be with that person. There's a difference. Me having compassion and understanding the elements of what takes this person here. Again, with the addiction, I can totally understand what can take. Like I think when we are judging others, we forget the environmental, the circumstantial elements of it, and we give it to their qualities as a human being and their choice. And when it's us, we are able to see, like, I did it, but I did it because of this. We have a more understanding of circumstantial elements for ourselves than others. So it makes us to look at people in a very simplified manner. We look at like addiction problems as a personal choice. There's so many things that goes to addiction and different problems. And Philip Zimbardo, who studies the evil, like the guy who did the Stanford prison experiment, the famous experiment, he has a saying which I love. He says, "You cannot be a sweet cucumber in a vinegar barrel."
You cannot be a sweet cucumber in a vinegar barrel. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm going to take it to the, calling things, people and places toxic workplaces, right?
Mm-hmm.
People talk about that a lot, how like that company was so toxic, the culture over
Right.
there was toxic.
Right.
What is toxic? I think a toxic environment is where most people function at fight or flight.
Interesting. Okay.
Right? Because when you're a fight or flight, number one, you are judgmental of other people,
Mm-hmm.
because your social engagement system is off. And your brain's taking everything ambiguous or neutral as dangerous.
So your social engagement system is off. And what's incorporated in social engagement system? What does that mean by social engagement? Be agreeableness? Is that?
Well, ventral vagal system is your social engagement system, and social engagement system is another survival response for humans. It's the most sophisticated survival that made us the top dog, right? Not dog, animal. And the animal kingdom is because we developed this top-notch survival response through social engagement, through collaborating with other human beings. We developed language. We created things together. If you look at a human being, a likelihood of survival in nature is super slim. We can't run fast. We don't have any clothes. We are the biggest predator on Earth. We don't have clothes, sharp teeth. We're not that strong. Our strength comes from our survival response of social engagement, and there is a neural network just designed for that. Right? This is a newer network that happened during evolution. So when social engagement system is active, my middle ear, tunes into the human sounds, mid-frequency sounds where the human sound is. When I'm in fight or flight, it changes its shape so that it can listen to low frequency, high frequency. So you're literally not listening to human sounds when you're in fight or flight. The social engagement system comes on, and all of a sudden the middle ear muscles change its tone to capture mid-frequency human sounds. And then we have a way of syncing with other nervous systems. And a baby is born and we are talking to a baby. Nobody talks to a baby usually unless there's something wrong with their social engagement system, like they would talk to me, right? You go like, ah, la, 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 la. There's this melodic way of thing, because our social engagement system is active. When it's active, we have more prosody, more tonation in our voice, right? Our face is different. Like we have, our facial expressions are different. So, and the way our physiology works completely different. The way our brain works is that now our prefrontal cortex is working optimally, so I can make future projections. I can, do critical thinking. I can do creative thinking. All these sophisticated human thinking, mental processes are available to me. But if I go to fight or flight, I'm kind of locking in the human qualities. I'm going like with one below more animal qualities. Like I'm behaving like an animal. When it's in fear, they're like growling and like they're ready to attack or run away. So more like that animal at that point. And when you go to dorsal shutdown, we call it a reptilian response, because we adapted it from reptilians like really, really long time ago, before humans were ever.
Yeah, there's like 3 layers to the brain, right? There's like the reptilian brain, the limbic system, and then the
cortex. So these are evolutionary. That dorsal vagal reptilian response is the oldest. Then you have the fight or flight on top of it. Then the sophisticated human elements is newer in the evolution. So the thing is, when we are in danger, we start employing the newest one first. If it doesn't work, we go one layer down. If it doesn't work, we go one layer down. And if the older system is active, it overruns everything else. So all the structures are stronger. If they're activated, they shut everything else down.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So,
Is it?
yeah,
Yep. So is it that you mentioned the toxic workplace, and with the toxic workplace, it's pretty much fight or flight all the time. How have people described toxic workplace to you? Because I heard that. Yeah.
There's an underlying assumption these are bad people. Like nobody says it like that. But the way I kind of hear that presumption, I was like shitty people, right? And rather than understanding, okay, like this person is in this state, and what are the, like sometimes the belief system that makes people more likely to do that. And man, the way we look at business and performance is very fight or flight response producing belief system and culture. So in itself, the culture is pushing people to more fight or flight response. On top of it, like I work with a lot of startup founders. If you think about the startup life cycle, it's a super stressful, life cycle. So it's easy for leaders to be on fight flight for a long time, and it trickles down from that because it's contagious, because our nervous systems sync to other people's nervous system. And when even you don't tell me anything, if you're in fight or flight and I'm talking to you, my system is start gonna changing as well, responding to that.
Has any client told you, or even talked about a workplace where fight or flight might also include being, I guess it comes down to what you're saying, which is being judgmental, but also kind of like threatening in terms of accomplishments and everything else like that. So I've heard this before when I was listening to a podcast, or I think I was listening to a TED Talk, I don't remember, about how to be charismatic or charming. And one of the things they mentioned was that sense of worth was important, but a sense of not being threatening in a confident way. And that seemed to be really important. So confident and non-threatening. Like non-threatening and confident. What do they mean by that? What they talked about how talking about a person's accomplishments, or even hearing about another person's accomplishments, can automatically threaten the person's subject itself. And I wonder if that puts a person to fight or flight as well. Have you heard things like that?
Totally.
Yeah.
I
Don't they call it a tall poppy syndrome?
Clients all the time. It happens all of a sudden. It's someone that they shouldn't even, it doesn't even make sense sometimes, because they don't want to be like that person, but they feel intimidated by what they have. And I experienced it sometimes, right? Like sometimes it's not very obvious to me rationally what I find intimidating about that person, because they may be higher status with some, I'm totally okay with it. But I think it also depends on their nervous system state. Okay. Imagine, like, I meet this powerful person who has a lot of power and status, and they are in ventral vagal, they're in social engagement system. So they are connecting with me, they are very friendly with me, right? Then it's a good thing for me, beneficial for me, to have this powerful person with me, because they're going to support me. It's like in an unconscious way, right? I look at that person is my friend and powerful. It's good to have powerful friends.
Yeah.
Positive. And if they are in fight or flight mode, nothing related to me, I meet them, I feel like they're powerful, but my nervous system senses they are ready to fight. Now they are dangerous. On top of it, they are powerful. How do I feel? Now I'm like, ooh, I don't want to be around this person.
Yeah, so I could tell you that. So I had a friend of mine. She is one of the most charismatic people that I know. A little stoic, doesn't say very, very much, but the impression that you get out of her is that she seems to be very at ease of who she is, even though she doesn't say very much. So she doesn't come off as having this type of, I guess, shy energy, but as understanding. So she'll like actually everybody, and she'll turn people who are quote unquote intimidating, big personalities, to liking her, even though she is, whatever, right? Like, even though she's like, doesn't have a big personality herself. So I've always found that to be very, very interesting that she didn't, I guess she just doesn't have this fight or flight response to everybody around her, was I guess someone like me would. I guess the question is, how do you get around that to get to a state where, even though the environment is very fight or flight, someone like her can get into that environment, be dropped into that environment, charm everybody and have everybody like her without her
Yeah.
actively trying to smile, actively trying to make jokes, because she's not an active participant in terms of being a social person. People just naturally eventually will like her.
Yeah.
I found that very, very interesting. And I think that's something that a lot of people or is trying to figure it out, so that they could be dropped in any type of toxic, quote unquote, situation for most people, and just be fine with it and just end up charming people.
Yeah. So the thing I would guess that she is most of the time, like we all go to all these states, right? Like all states are available to us. We can go all three of them in the same day. But we are different in the ways like where do we spend most of our days? Which state is active, right? I would predict she is mostly in ventral vagal when, you know, her social engagement system is on. So she's functioning in a place where the world is okay and things are safe, right? And if she is really strongly living there most of the time, it will be, and maybe it's her threshold to activate fight or flight is a little higher, so that she doesn't go there quickly. And the way we get out of what they call fight or flight, a good way of doing it is co-regulation, regulating with other human beings. Through talking to each other, we get ourselves out of the fight or flight to safety. And when you are fight or flight, the best you can do is think of someone that who would be mostly in ventral vagal, and go talk to them, just like randomly. You don't have to talk about the subject that you're, bothered by. Just through that conversation, even the changing of voice, your system is going to detect their system of safety and go back to safety, so they can pick you up from that state. I think what's happening with her, when she goes to places, people seem to go towards her. I had the opposite going on with me. Like, I was like, since birth, I had a super irritable nervous system, like I was sick all the time, like super sensitive to everything. So I had a very, childhood that was difficult, also like not a very supportive environment. So my system was very agitated. And I remember, like in middle school and high school, like there were so many people that hated me. They didn't even know me. They didn't talk to me even once. And I had these enemies, like they just looked at me, they decided they hate me.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I'm little, like I usually stick out, like I don't go with the norms much, like that makes me more visible in crowds. That was one element. But when I made myself visible, you can be also popular, right? It was the turn. They saw me and they hated me. They found me very intimidating. People were really scared of me. They, I would become friends after, and they would tell me, oh, like I was so scared of you, Mac. Why would you be scared? Like, you don't even know me. But I think they were tapping into that restlessness. Me being fight or flight mode was, their nervous system was responding in a way that I was dangerous to them because I was ready to fight. They could sense that.
That's very interesting, because there are some people where they just walk in the room without saying much, with almost in an instant you feel either warmth or the opposite. And I wonder if it's what you just mentioned, which is their state is something that emanates, that people could read quickly.
Yeah.
That's very, very interesting. I did so I did mushrooms actually 2 weeks ago, and
don't get it. We need to do a next episode on mushrooms.
Right.
We forget that because we need to wrap it up.
Okay, cool. Basically, we'll talk about that on the next one, but pretty much what I found very therapeutic was that I was roasting myself. And what that did was that allowed me to laugh about how terrible I was. And what that did was that I was like, man, if I get practice of people roasting me and I could laugh at myself, that makes the world a little bit less intimidating to me. And that would take that power away. Because as I was roasting myself, I was laughing so hard at how, I was like, oh, Tony, you're a piece of shit. You did this. Ha, 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 ha. And then like the person who was doing it with me, she was saying the same thing, and I started laughing at it. I'm like, that takes away that power, because the idea is that I think ultimately you feel that some people are intimidating or what have you because you fear of an attack of any kind, and you might not be able to take it, right? If people have certain degrees of sensitivity, but if you have the confidence that you could take it no matter what, and now that I think about it, that charismatic woman I know, she with her best friends roast each other all the time, and it just bounces right off or it just goes right through them. So it comes down to play. And so if you feel that you don't worry, you take away that power and then you turn it into play, that's that charisma right there. And then, it might be how she diffuses all these quote unquote toxic environments.
Yeah, it's both ways, right? If
Mhm.
you can bring humor into a situation, what you're doing is you're taking something, let's say a weakness in you, and rather than your brain looking at it as, oh, like this is dangerous, this is gonna endanger me, right?
Mhm.
This weakness of me. When you see the humor in it, all of a sudden it's safe to have
Right.
weaknesses, safe to feel. And so by bringing humor, you can switch your state. And if you're on ventral vagal and you see a weakness, and it's easier to see it as, oh, like I failed, or I have like I'm stupid like this. So what? Because you're
Mhm.
coming from a place of safety, right? That's the whole difference. When you look at your weakness from a safety perspective, it's funny.
Right.
It's dangerous. It's not funny. It's dangerous.
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. Well, I'm going to be experimenting again this weekend and with
All
another.
right.
We're going to start roasting each other and see what that does. But it's something I'm going to try out. But
Yeah.
anyways, as I mentioned, I think it's been an hour. We are going to be wrapping that up. Yeah, it's been a fantastic conversation. Hoping to do this again soon. Maybe we'll talk about. Who knows what we'll talk about? We'll talk about mushrooms, right? Or psychedelics and how that
Yeah,
plays.
I would love to talk about psychedelics actually.
Yeah.
That's
Great.
all right. As always,
This is awesome.
great conversation. Great time with you. All right, then I'll see you next week.